A royal insider has opened up about the time Princess Diana threw him a 50th birthday party.
Watch the seating chart before you watch the smile. That's the habit of anyone who studies royal appearances closely. And on the 1st of July 2026, it matters more than usual. Diana, Princess of Wales, would have turned 65 today. She is not here. She has not been here for almost 3 decades. And yet her name is still the reason cameras are pointed at a certain doorway this morning. Prince William, Prince of Wales, steps into frame. Beside him, King Charles III. Beside the King, Queen Camilla. 3 people, 1 photograph, and this is my read. Not a confirmed fact, a great deal riding on how that photograph gets interpreted by the public watching at home. Most coverage today will call this a tribute. A son marking his mother's birthday. That's a fair reading. It's probably the main one. But I want to offer a second reading. And I want to be upfront that this is opinion, not something anyone in the palace has confirmed. Watch what William does with his posture, his distance from Charles and Camilla, the length of time he lingers near the cameras versus how quickly he moves past them. None of that is dramatic. That's the point. Hi, viewers. Before we go further, I want to ask you something simple. When you see William photographed next to Charles and Camilla on a day tied to Diana, does it read to you as grief, as duty, or as something more calculated? Drop your honest first reaction in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how people are reading this moment differently. There is no confirmed statement from William about what today means to him internally. There likely won't be one. That absence of comment is itself something commentators, myself included, tend to read into, for better or worse. It's worth being honest about that going in. What we do know, factually, today is a real anniversary. Diana remains, by wide agreement among royal commentators and historians, one of the most emotionally significant figures in the modern monarchy's public life. William is a real, present working royal whose public schedule is a matter of public record. Everything past that, what any of it means, is interpretation, mine included. So here's where I'm going to take you over the next several minutes. Not into William's head, because I can't go there, neither can anyone else outside his family, but into the pattern of how a small handful of royal public appearances have looked, going back several years, and why some royal watchers think those patterns say something about how the monarchy manages its own future. Whether you buy that argument is up to you. One appearance rarely tells you anything on its own. It's the second one, and the third, that start to form a shape. That's where we're headed next. Before we get further into today, it's worth being honest about why this particular day gets so much attention in the first place, and why I think it's worth more than a headline. Diana's public standing didn't fade after her death in 1997. If anything, by most measures, media coverage, volume, documentary output, book sales, public polling on royal favorability, her presence in British public life stayed unusually strong for a person who has been gone for almost 30 years. That's not speculation, it's a well-documented media pattern. Royal commentators have pointed to it for years. William occupies an unusual position because of that. He is, factually, both her son and the direct heir to the throne after Charles. Those two identities pull in different directions in how the public tends to read him. As a son, people expect visible emotion on a day like this. As a future king, the institution he represents has historically favored composure over visible emotion in public settings. That's a long-documented pattern in how the British monarchy has handled public appearances generally, not something unique to William. That tension, expected emotion versus institutional composure, is, in my opinion, the real story underneath today's coverage, not a hidden plot. Just an ordinary, human, and very public difficulty. How do you publicly mark grief for a parent while also being watched as the future head of state? Charles carries his own version of this same tension. He was married to Diana, then divorced from her under intense public scrutiny, and has since built a public life with Camilla that took years by most accounts, well over a decade to gain broad public acceptance. Whatever Charles feels privately about today, his public role requires him to hold space for Diana's memory without it reading as a statement about his marriage to Camilla. That's a genuinely difficult needle to thread, and I don't think it's fair to assume he's failing at it just because today's photograph is quiet rather than emotional. Camilla, Queen Camilla, has arguably the hardest position of the three. Public opinion polling over the years has shown her favorability rising substantially since the early 2000s, but she remains, for a meaningful portion of the public, still linked to the story of Charles and Diana's marriage breakdown. Her presence in any Diana-adjacent moment will always be read by some people as respectful and by others as uncomfortable. That split exists whether she says anything or not. None of that is a scandal. It's just a genuinely complicated family situation playing out in public, which is, I think, why people keep watching. What's less commented on is what happens next, how this same tension shows up again and again across other royal appearances, not just today. That's where the pattern starts to matter more than any single photograph.
Work you've achieved. In the past 12 years, I can honestly say that one of my greatest pleasures has been my association with people like yourself. During those years, I've met many thousands of wonderful...
I want to slow down here and be careful, because this is the part where commentary can drift into overreach if you're not honest about the limits of what's known. Diana's legacy is well documented. She reshaped how the public expected royals to behave: more visible charity work, more physical warmth with the public, less formality. Royal historians generally credit her with permanently shifting expectations for how the monarchy presents itself. That shift didn't end with her death. It arguably shaped how William and his brother, Harry, Duke of Sussex, were both raised to engage with the public. William, as Prince of Wales, inherited a monarchy under real modernization pressure, declining institutional trust in some polling, ongoing questions about the monarchy's cost and relevance, and a media environment far more fragmented than the one Diana navigated. His public choices, from his charity focuses to his more relaxed public demeanor compared to some previous heirs, are widely read by commentators as a deliberate response to that pressure. That's a reasonably well-supported interpretation, not a fringe one. Catherine, Princess of Wales, is generally described in royal coverage as a stabilizing public presence, someone whose public appearances tend to draw less controversy and more straightforward public affection. I'll say plainly, I don't have special insight into her private role in family decisions. What I can say is that her public function, appearance after appearance, reads as steady in a way that contrasts with almost everyone else in this story. Harry is the clearest counterpoint. Since stepping back from royal duties in 2020, his public statements in interviews, in his memoir, in documentary appearances have directly challenged the institution's handling of Diana's memory and of his own upbringing. Whatever you think of his choices, his public record gives us something the others don't. His own words, on record, about how he believes the family handles these moments. That's worth remembering as a contrast to how much we're inferring about everyone else. And Charles and Camilla's history is, again, a matter of public record, a long, publicly scrutinized relationship, a divorce, years of gradual public acceptance. I'm not going to speculate about what either of them feels about today. I don't know, and neither does anyone reading this. What I'm building toward is simple. Every person in this family carries a different, publicly documented relationship to Diana's memory. That's the real context. Whatever appears in headlines today is happening on top of that longer, more complicated history, not instead of it. Keep that in mind as we move into what actually happened today, because I think it changes how you read it. So here's what's actually confirmed, as plainly as I can state it. Diana would have turned 65 today, the 1st of July, 2026. William, as Prince of Wales, appeared publicly in connection with a royal engagement reported in British press coverage today. King Charles III and Queen Camilla were also present in the same general public cycle of appearances. That is the entirety of the confirmed, factual core of today's story. Everything past that is interpretation, audience interpretation, media interpretation, and my own. Public expectation on a day like this tends to lean toward visible tribute, a public statement, a specific mention of Diana, some overt marker of the day. From what's been reported, that didn't happen in a dramatic way. No grand public statement, no emotional address. Just routine, scheduled royal duty, continuing as if the day were largely like any other working day. I think that absence is more interesting than a statement would have been, and here's my honest reasoning, clearly labeled as my opinion. A visible, emotional public tribute from William would center him personally in the story. A quiet, business-as-usual public appearance does something different. It keeps the institution, rather than his personal grief, at the center of the frame. Whether that's a deliberate choice or simply how his schedule happened to fall this year, I genuinely don't know. Nobody outside his immediate circle does. What I can tell you is that royal commentators have flagged similar patterns before quiet, undramatic appearances on emotionally loaded dates, rather than public statements. Some read that as institutional discipline. Others read it as emotional distance. I gently push back on assuming it's either one for certain. People grieve differently, and heirs to thrones don't get to grieve entirely on their own terms, in public or private. Here's the detail I keep coming back to, and it's the one I want to leave you with going into the next section. This is not the first time a Diana-linked date has passed with this same quiet, procedural tone from the family.
Listens to you, or you feel no one's listening to you, all sorts of things start to happen. For instance, you have so much pain inside yourself that you try and hurt yourself on the outside because you want help, but it's the wrong help you're asking for. People see it as crying wolf or attention seeking, and they think because you're in the media all the time, you've got enough attention.
If that's a pattern rather than a coincidence, it tells you something about how the institution has decided to handle her memory long term, not through public mourning, through steadiness. Whether that steadiness is a strategy or just how the family has learned to cope, I can't say for certain. But the repetition of it is real, and it's worth tracing. If today's appearance is part of a pattern rather than a one-off, the question becomes, a pattern of what, exactly? Here's my interpretation, stated plainly as interpretation. Royal appearances, across almost any monarchy, function as a form of communication even when nobody says anything. Who stands next to whom? Who attends which event? How often a family member appears publicly around a sensitive date? Royal historians and commentators have long treated these choices as meaningful, the same way political analysts read a head of state's choice of which events to attend or skip. That's a standard, fairly uncontroversial way of reading institutional behavior. It doesn't require a conspiracy, it just requires paying attention to repetition. By that logic, quiet, undramatic appearances on Diana-linked dates, repeated over multiple years, could reasonably be read as the institution choosing composure over public emotional display as a long-term approach to her memory. That's a real interpretive claim people make, and I find it a reasonably convincing one, but I want to be honest that it's not something the palace has ever confirmed, and it's not the only way to read the same facts. Some commentators would say it's simpler than that. Royals have busy schedules, and dates don't always get the weight outsiders assume they should. Camilla's position inside this pattern is worth noting again. Her presence at Diana-linked institutional moments has, over the years, drawn mixed public reaction read by some as evidence the family has moved forward together, and by others as a reminder of what came before. I don't think there's a version of her simply being present that would satisfy everyone, and I think that's worth acknowledging rather than glossing over. William's part in this, if the pattern reading holds, is the most consequential, because he is the one who will eventually hold the position his father holds now. If his public handling of Diana's memory today resembles how he's handled it in past years, steady, low-key, institution first, that consistency is, in my opinion, more telling than any single appearance could be on its own. Consistency is harder to write off as coincidence than a single data point is. I want to be clear about where I land. I don't think this is a hidden conspiracy or a secret plan. I think it's a family, operating inside an old and heavily scrutinized institution, making repeated choices about how to carry a very public grief without letting it define the monarchy's public image going forward. That's a real, human, defensible way to cope, even if it sometimes reads to the public as cold. Whether that reading holds up depends on what happens at the next major royal milestone tied to Diana's memory, and whether the same quiet pattern shows up again or breaks. There's a detail from a separate royal event, months before today, that suddenly looks different once you know where this story is heading. At a public engagement earlier this year, William stood at a distance from Charles that royal photographers and commentators noted as unusually wide for a formal event. At the time, it barely made the coverage, a passing observation in a handful of royal watcher accounts online. Nobody built a story around it. I'm bringing it back now because, seen next to today's quiet procedural appearance, it starts to look less like an isolated moment and more like a piece of something repeated. To be clear about what this is and isn't, I am not saying this distance meant conflict. I don't know that, and neither does anyone writing about it publicly. What I am saying is that royal commentators have, for years, treated physical distance and positioning at public events as one of the few observable signals available to outsiders, precisely because so little else about the family's internal relationships is ever confirmed on the record. That's not a fringe method of analysis. It's close to the only method available when an institution controls its own messaging as tightly as this one does. Here's where the tension actually sits, and I think it's worth naming directly. The public wants emotional honesty from William, especially around Diana. The institution he's inheriting has historically rewarded restraint. Those two demands don't fully agree with each other, and every public appearance he makes is, in some sense, a negotiation between them. That negotiation is not a scandal, it's the actual job. Camilla's public presence continues to draw a divided response, and that split hasn't meaningfully closed even after years of broader public acceptance.
William's mother was this massive, iconic figure, the most famous figure of our age. Is that worrying? Is that intimidating? Do you think about that a lot, both of you? You particularly, Kate, obviously.
Well, obviously it'd be, I would love to have met her, and she's obviously, she's
Some of that division, by most reporting, traces directly back to how the public still processes Diana's story. That's not new information, but it's easy to forget how much it still shapes reactions to any photograph where the two women's legacies sit side by side, even indirectly. Charles, meanwhile, is navigating something else entirely. A reign that began under real institutional pressure, with public trust in the monarchy lower in some polling than at points during his mother's reign. Every choice he makes about how visibly to engage with Diana's memory gets read against that backdrop, whether he intends it to or not. None of these pressures are secret. They've been reported and discussed for years. What's less discussed is how they might be quietly shaping the family's public choices in real time, and that's exactly where the next piece of this story picks up. Here's the moment that made a lot of royal commentators sit up. William's public schedule this year lines up, almost point for point, with a pattern historians have identified in past royal transitions long before any coronation, long before any formal announcement, when the heir apparent begins carrying more of the institution's public weight while the reigning monarch is still very much on the throne. This is a real, documented historical pattern. Royal historians have pointed to similar shifts before past successions. In this monarchy and others, a gradual redistribution of public duties, not announced, not dramatic, but visible if you track engagement calendars over time. I want to be careful here. Pointing to a historical pattern is not the same as proving intent, but the pattern itself is well documented, and it's fair to ask whether we're watching an early version of it now. If that reading holds, today's quiet appearance on Diana's birthday isn't really about Diana at all, not primarily. It's one data point inside a much longer, slower process. William being seen, again and again, in settings that emphasize stability and institutional continuity rather than personal emotion. Reports circulating among royal biographers over recent years have floated versions of this idea that William's public style has been deliberately built around restraint, in contrast to some of the more visibly emotional public moments associated with his mother. I think that's a defensible reading. I also think it's worth holding loosely, because we're inferring intention from behavior, and people are allowed to simply be private by nature rather than strategic by design. What makes this moment specifically interesting, though, is timing. Charles's health has been a subject of public reporting since his cancer diagnosis became public in 2024. That reporting alone, not speculation, actual public record, means any increase in William's visible public role naturally invites questions about preparation for a transition, whether or not that's the actual reason behind it. Put those two things together, a monarch whose health has been a matter of public reporting, and an heir whose public presence has grown steadily more visible and more controlled, and you get a moment where almost anything William does gets read through the lens of, is this about now, or is this about later? Today, on his mother's birthday, that lens was pointed directly at him. And what the cameras caught next is the part that actually shifted how I read this whole year. So here's the detail that, once you see it, is hard to unsee. According to multiple Royal Watcher accounts and press pool reporting from today's engagement, William's public appearance was brief, shorter, by most accounts, than comparable engagements earlier this year. He arrived, completed the scheduled duty, and departed without extending the visit or adding informal public interaction, which he has done at other events in the past. On its own, that's a small thing. Schedules run tight. People have other places to be. But layered onto everything we've traced the wider positioning from months ago, the historical pattern of heirs gradually absorbing public duties before any formal transition, the ongoing public reporting around Charles's health, a short, efficient, unembellished appearance on Diana's 65th birthday reads differently than it would on an ordinary Tuesday. Here's my honest interpretation, and I want to say plainly that it is an interpretation, not a confirmed fact. William may be, consciously or not, building a public template for how he intends to handle emotionally loaded moments once he is king: brief, respectful, present, not expansive. If Diana's memory is going to remain one of the most powerful emotional forces in British public life for decades to come, and most royal historians think it will, then how her son publicly handles it again and again becomes a kind of ongoing referendum on what kind of monarch he'll be.
I guess on top of that as well, probably what people don't know, but that is mentioned in the judgment today, Ravek protect private citizens. You know, I was made a private citizen by the royal household, not by Ravek, by the royal household. I can't be a private citizen. I will never be seen as a private citizen. I will never be treated as a private citizen.
Catherine's absence from heavy public commentary in today's coverage is also worth noting. She has, by most reporting patterns over recent years, tended to appear in the softer, more human-facing royal narratives, while William has increasingly carried the more formal, institutional appearances. If that division of public roles is intentional, it suggests the family may be quietly building two distinct public functions, one warm, one steady, rather than asking any single person to hold both. Camilla's position in all of this remains the most complex, and I don't think there's a clean resolution to it. She has spent over 2 decades in British public life working toward broader acceptance, and by most polling has largely achieved it. But Diana's birthday will likely always be a day where that acceptance gets quietly tested again, regardless of anything Camilla does or doesn't do. What happens at the next major royal milestone, a coronation anniversary, a significant birthday, an unplanned health update, will tell us whether today's quiet, efficient appearance was a coincidence or the clearest look yet at how this family plans to carry Diana's memory into the next reign. Step back far enough, and the emotional weight of all this stops being about one family and starts being about something much bigger. Diana's death in 1997 didn't just create a moment of national grief by most historical accounts. It permanently changed the relationship between the British public and the monarchy. People expected visibility. They expected emotional honesty. That expectation didn't fade with time. If anything, 3 decades of documentaries, interviews, and renewed public interest have kept it alive, arguably stronger than ever heading into 2026. William was 15 when his mother died. That's not speculation, it's a documented fact of his biography. Whatever public composure he shows now, at 44 years old, is being read by an audience that, in many cases, remembers exactly how young he was when this all began. That context doesn't excuse or explain any specific choice he makes today. But it's part of why the public reaction to his composure is so mixed. Some read it as strength, others as distance, and both reactions are, in my view, understandable. The institutional demand for neutrality, the expectation that a future king shouldn't visibly perform grief in public, sits directly against the human reality of losing a parent young and publicly. That tension isn't unique to William, but few people in modern public life have had to carry it under this much sustained scrutiny for this long. Media coverage tends to amplify whichever side of that tension is easiest to dramatize. A visible emotional moment gets headlines about a grieving son. A quiet, procedural appearance gets headlines about a calculating heir. Both framings are usually too simple. Most likely, according to how royal historians tend to describe long-term patterns like this, the truth sits somewhere in between a person managing real grief inside a role that rarely allows him to show it in the way the public wants. What comes next in this story isn't a single dramatic reveal. It's a question that will only get answered slowly, over the next several royal milestones. Does William's approach hold steady as he moves closer to the throne? Or does something shift once the pressure of an actual coronation replaces the pressure of merely being heir? That answer is still being written in real time, and the next milestone that tests it may be closer than anyone expects. Here's where all of this actually lands, and it's simpler than the last several minutes might suggest. Today, the 1st of July 2026, Diana would have turned 65. William, Prince of Wales, marked it the way he has marked most emotionally loaded royal moments in recent years. Briefly, publicly, and without visible drama. King Charles III and Queen Camilla shared the same institutional frame. Nothing about today's confirmed events was extraordinary. What made it worth 30 minutes of analysis is everything sitting underneath it, a family managing one of the most publicly scrutinized griefs in modern history inside an institution that has never been fully comfortable letting grief be visible. If the pattern we've traced across William's public appearances holds steady, brief, institution first, then the most reasonable interpretation, in my opinion, is not that he's cold or calculating, It's that he's building a public style suited for the role he's inheriting, one appearance at a time, long before anyone puts a crown on his head. Royal historians have described this kind of gradual, undramatic preparation before past transitions, and there's a real case that we're watching an early version of it now. That's my honest read. It's not the only possible one, and I'd genuinely like to know if you see it differently. Charles's ongoing health reporting means the timeline for when William's current public role becomes his permanent one remains genuinely uncertain. Nobody outside the family knows that timeline, and speculating on a specific date would be irresponsible. What's fair to say is that whenever that transition happens, today's quiet, disciplined appearance may end up looking like one of the earliest visible signs of how William intends to carry the throne. Diana's memory isn't going anywhere. 3 decades on, she remains one of the most emotionally powerful figures in the monarchy's modern story, and every milestone tied to her will likely keep drawing this same level of public attention for years to come. How her son continues to handle those moments quietly, publicly, under constant watch, may end up telling us more about the next reign than any formal announcement ever will. If this kind of deep, patient royal analysis is something you want more of, this channel is where it lives. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next breakdown. And drop your own read on today's appearance in the comments. I read them, and I'd like to hear where you land on this one.